I don't know about you, but sometimes developing support, gathering the information can be a little bit intimidating. So I want to break this up. We're going to talk about what does it mean to develop support. Support is really the information that you're collecting that you want to share, and you want to make sure that it's credible. So I want to go over different types pretty quickly, but here's what I want you to remember. Every quote and every story and every metaphor and every example and everything that you use is a piece of your puzzle. And when all those pieces are in the right place, it's beautiful. And it's the picture that the designer intended. But when they're out of place, it's hard to really see the picture. So I want you to remember that metaphor as we go through this. Let's start with examples. When you are putting together a presentation, you can use examples. When you're sharing from your own experience, that's great. There are 3 types your textbook talks about: brief, very short, extended a little bit longer where you're maybe adding some explanation, and finally, a hypothetical example. Some examples I use in teaching aren't necessarily from my own life. I'm just hypothetically explaining to help my audience get their head around it. The next one is my favorite. We'll elaborate on this more this semester, but stories are a great thing to put into your presentation. It is so good for adding to your puzzle. They don't all start with once upon a time, but an effective story used maybe at the beginning of a presentation, at the end of a presentation, or to really anchor a main point has an incredible effect. In fact, research says that an audience is 22 times more likely to remember a story than a statistic. We call it the 22x effect. They require an arc. They have to be told well. So we're going to talk about what that looks like in another module. We want our audience to release the right kinds of chemicals. So we want to do a great job telling the story. They can vary in length. I could tell you a 20-second anecdote. I could tell you a 2-minute story. For this class, you want to really work on packaging them effectively, but also very brief. Now we have this idea of testimony. So I think this is interesting. Lots of students, when we get into persuasion, want to use support, and they want to use testimonies or examples. We make decisions a lot based on testimonies. It looks like Yelp reviews, maybe even, dare I say, Rate My Professor. But we have 2 categories or 2 types. One is lay, and I don't know if you've heard that term before. It's kind of an old term, but lay just means someone kind of on the side. Examples of this would look like an eyewitness, a neighbor, a friend, a coworker, somebody that they brought into the courtroom that said, "Did you see what happened?" But our other type of testimony is an expert testimony. This is someone whose word maybe carries a little more weight. This is a physician or doctor, maybe a psychiatrist, maybe a certified technician or expert in the field. If someone loses their mind, right, a neighbor could say, "Yeah, I saw him throwing eggs out his window." But a psychiatrist would come in and say, they have a certified mental disorder, been given an official diagnosis. Both of those help your argument. Both of those can help sustain it. It doesn't have to be either or. But it's important that we know the difference and we not lean solely on lay testimony to support something or solely on this idea of expert testimony. All right. Finally, last one, and that is just facts. I want you to share facts in your presentations. I want you to give us real data, real information that you found from real credible sources. But you need to remember 2 specific things when you're doing that. Here they are. Use ethically. We've talked about ethics. Evaluate how they conducted the study. Where did they conduct it? The methods that they used. When we say cherry picking, it means we took information or results and we used it for our own benefit. So let's say you want to convince an audience of Texas kindergarten teachers how to teach students to read, but you use data from an Australian study of kindergartners who couldn't read. Well, that's not happening in America, and they're under a different system. So you want to avoid cherry picking data. You also want to use it with perspective. You need to make sure that you give us the whole picture. If I say, gosh, they did this study, there are 50% of kids in this area developed cancer. 50% is a high number. It's not as impressive if you say there were only 2 kids in the study. So if I say they did a study on a family, two kids are in the family, 1 developed cancer. Yes, that's 50%. 50% can sound like an important number, but when you put it in perspective and say they actually only looked at 2, it's maybe not so impressive. So important that when we say methodology or how you use things, when you're using facts, you use them ethically and you make sure that you use perspective. All right, it's time to start building your puzzle. Go out, take your topic, begin to put together examples that you can use to explain, stories that you may have, testimonies, that means quotes maybe from lay people and expert people, and also pull some facts. We want your puzzle to be as effective as it can possibly be. So get those pieces. Put your puzzle together. I can't wait to see.